Okay, so as I was saying, it starts on the axis, the x-axis, and then it goes above the x-axis, back to the x-axis, which I'm going to call midline, to the minimum below it, and then back to the x-axis again. Okay, so that's one cycle. What we need to do now, this one cycle has to fit from 0 to pi instead of 0 to 2 pi. So always divide it, just divide it by 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to fit that one cycle from 0 to pi, so divide pi by 4, and those are your 4 intervals. You start at the midline. The amplitude here would be 1 because there's nothing in front of sine, so A is just 1. So you go up to 1 for your maximum, back to your midline, down to -1 for your minimum, back to your midline. This is one cycle that ends at pi. This is one complete cycle for sine that ends at pi, has a period of pi. However, we have to fill in this whole graph, so keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our next cycle is going to now end at 2 pi. How do we do that? You go up to 1 again, back to your midline again, down to -1 again, back to your midline again. So how many cycles do we see from 0 to 2 pi? We see 2 cycles. B does 2 things. It tells you the number of cycles that you will see from 0 to 2 pi, and you also need to use it to find the period of just one cycle. Okay? And then, of course, because we still have all of this space to the left, we've got to use it. So -1, 0, +1, 0, -1, 0, +1, 0. It just keeps repeating in a wave-like motion. All right, so we're going to go practice the period right here. Okay, f of x equals sine 4x. A, B, C. A, B, C. We don't have an A here, which means A is 1. We do have a B, which means we have to adjust our period. Again, B tells us 2 things. That means from 0 to 2 pi, we are going to have to fit 4 sine cycles from 0 to 2 pi. 4 complete cycles. This is one cycle, so we're going to have to fit 4 of those from 0 to 2 pi. Okay? Find the period. The period is 2 pi over b. b is 4. 2 pi over 4, well, that reduces to pi over 2. The 2 goes into the 4 2 times. So this becomes pi over 2. This is where one cycle will end. This is pi over 2 right here. I know it's kind of hard to read. So this right here is where one cycle will end. So you take your period, and we know it's going to end at 0. We know sine starts at the midline. We know sine ends at the midline. It always starts at the midline, ends at the midline, and it's at the midline halfway through. Mark it. Now what's the rest going to do? You go up to 0, 1/4 of the way, back to the midline. Did I say up to 0? Okay, let me try again. Up to 1, 1/4 of the way through, back to your midline 0, down to -1, 3/4 of the way through, and then end at the midline. That is one cycle of sine that has an amplitude of 1 and a period of pi over 2. It has a period of pi over 2 because that one cycle ends at pi over 2. So how do we keep going? Do it again. The next period will be another, so pi over 2 just went from here to here. Do it again from pi over 2 to pi. You've got your Midline halfway through. So you go up to 1, back to your midline, down to -1, back to your midline. Now you're going to have to go from pi to 3 pi over 2 with your midline in the middle. Up to 1, back to 0, down to -1, back to 0. One last time to get from 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi. Up, down, down, up. Okay? Whew, kind of okay. I'm going to use different colors here. That's one cycle. I'll keep 2 as pink. That's the third complete cycle. And it doesn't matter. There we go. 4 complete cycles of the sine curve. That's how you get sine 4x. Okay? Kind of. What is 0.25 as a fraction? 1/4. Good. So this is your b. A, it goes A in front, B in the middle, and C at the end after x. So again, A is just going to be 1 here. That's nice. B is 1/4. The period is 2 pi over B. So the period is 2 pi over 1/4. When you have a fraction within a fraction, multiply by the denominator. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So what is 2 pi times 4? That's 8 pi. You still have over 1, but 8 pi over 1 is just 8 pi. So to see one full cycle, we would need to end at 8 pi. This graph doesn't go to 8 pi. It only goes to 2 pi. So what do we do? Okay. Remember, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. So take your period and divide it by 4. 8 pi divided by 4 is 2 pi. That means at each 2 pi, you're going to see one part. So this would be 2 pi. This would be another 2 pi, which is 4 pi. Another 2 pi would be 6 pi, and another 2 pi would be 8 pi. Okay? So 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi, 8 pi. To see one full cycle with a period of 8 pi, you would need to first stop at 2 pi, then 4 pi, then 6 pi, then 8 pi. Okay, well, our graph does stop at 2 pi. So we don't get to see any of that other stuff. We only get to see 1/4 of the sine curve. We can only see 1/4 of the sine curve. Remember, B tells you the number of cycles that you see. Here we see 4 complete cycles. Here, you're only going to see 1/4 of a complete cycle. So you start here, you go to your maximum, which is 1, and all you get to see is 1/4 of your cycle. That's that. All right, moving on. Oops, no. We got to do midline. Got to do midline. So again, memorize this. A sine bx plus c. Our key players are A, B, and C going in order. A is in front, B is in the middle, C is at the end. C is our midline. We call C our midline. Okay? So let's look at an example. This goes with a vertical shift, which it says right below, but take 2 seconds and write it here too. Great. If we're going to do the function, keep it simple to start. Y equals sine x plus 2. We have a midline. We have a plus something after sine x. So our plus 2 would go with C. So the equation of our midline, y equals C, would just be y equals 2 because C is 2. So what do we do with this? You draw a dotted line representing your midline. Okay? That basically is your new x-axis. That's where you start. And that's from that midline is where you go up to your maximum and down to your minimum. So sine usually starts at 0. But now It's starting at 2 because our midline is 2. And then it usually goes up to 1. Well, if we're already starting at 2, it's going to go up 1 to 3. It has a maximum of 3 now. And it goes back to our midline of 2. It has a minimum of 1. And then goes back to our midline of 2. So when you have a midline, you always start at the midline. Your amplitude is how much you go up and down from your midline. Okay? Our amplitude is 1 here because there was nothing in front of sine. So we just went up 1, back to our midline, down 1, back to our midline. And you could go the same in the opposite direction. Woo, woo, woo. Okay. Excuse me. This bottom part here, this is self-explanatory. You add, you go up, you subtract, you go down. We already talked about shifts. So again, you always start at your midline. You start with your midline C. You add your amplitude to know how high above your midline you go. You subtract your amplitude to know how far below your midline you go, but you always start with your midline. So, if we have 2 sine x plus 1, what is our vertical shift? Up 1. What is our midline? Y equals 1. But what have we not talked about yet? That number 2 that's in front. That is an amplitude of 2, which means from your, we always start with your midline. So start with your midline. From the midline, you go up 2. And then back to the midline. Down 2, oh my gosh, this kills me. How many students do this? Down 2 does not mean go to negative 2. Do not go to negative 2. It means from your midline, go down 2 and plot your point. We are at negative 1. We're not at negative 2. We're just going up 2 to 3 and then down 2 to our midline 1. Down 2 to negative 1 and back to our midline. Amplitude is this vertical distance from your midline. Okay? It doesn't mean you go to positive 2 and negative 2. It does if you don't have a midline or if your midline is the x-axis. But if you have a shift up 1 and a midline of positive 1, that's where you go up 2 and down 2 from. Okay? One last thing, I hope I don't run out of time. I want to show you guys cosine. The only difference here, so remember these values, 1, 0, and 0, 1. Remember, cosine goes with the x-coordinate. Okay? Cosine goes with the x-coordinate. So we're starting, when our angle is 0, our x-coordinate is 1. When our angle is 0, the value of cosine is 1. When our angle is pi over 2 up at the top, we went up, but our x value was 0. When our angle is pi, we went to the left. We went to the left 1. Our cosine value is negative 1. When we're down at 3 pi over 2, our x value is 0. And when we go back to 2 pi, we go back forward with an x value of 1. So now we've got to plot these points. 0, 1, you're not starting at the origin anymore. Sine starts at the midline, cosine starts at the maximum. Okay? So when you have pi over 2 and cosine is 0, go forwards to pi over 2, and 0 means stay there. When you're at pi, cosine has a value of negative 1, so go forwards to pi and down to negative 1. 3 pi over 2 has a value of 0, and 2 pi is back up at 1. So, okay, not my best, but it's okay. So sine, remember, has